The battlefield just exploded. Those cannons weren't just a demonstration, they were a cataclysm. Watching Modun's 60,000-strong army crumble into terrified, fleeing fragments after just a few volleys was breathtakingly brutal. The blood alleys carved by the cannonballs. What a visceral image. Suritu's lightning-fast decision to abandon Modun and throw in with the Han tribe, purely out of awe and self-preservation, felt so chillingly realistic. And then Chai, Duoduo's cold demonstration of chain shot on the defiant Shin tribe remnants. Pure, calculated devastation. The Han tribe isn't just winning, they're rewriting the rules of war with every thunderous blast. Modun, arrow in his arm, adopted son dead, and his grand alliance a shattered wreck, is now running for his life with Xuetu and a pragmatic Suritu hot on his heels. With fresh pursuers on the horizon, how can he possibly escape this nightmare? Modun knew full well that stopping now meant certain death. The Han tribe's superior forces would engulf him like a tide. But the several thousand Han light cavalry buzzing around him were as annoying as flies, sticking to him relentlessly, impossible to shake off. It was a real headache. After a moment's thought, Modun's eyes flickered and a plan formed. He decided to use the same old trick, detach another 3,000 men as a rearguard to buy time for the main force to escape. However, he wasn't stupid enough to send his own men to their deaths. He glanced around. The Shin tribe members had long since vanished, but a good number of Snow Wolf tribe members were still with him. More importantly, their chieftain was nowhere to be seen. Whether he was dead or had fled didn't matter. What mattered was that they could be thoroughly exploited. His mind made up, Modun gave a subtle look to a personal guard beside him. The guard understood, quietly detached from the group, and approached the Snow Wolf tribe's contingent, then yelled at the top of his lungs, "Our chieftain is surrounded by the Han army. Everyone follow me to rescue the chieftain. Warriors of the Snow Wolf tribe, follow me." The surrounding Snow Wolf tribe soldiers were stunned upon hearing this. They immediately craned their necks, searching everywhere for their chieftain. After a look around, hey, he really was gone. Consequently, a group of die-hard loyalists immediately responded to the call, turned their horses around with Modun's guard, and charged howling towards the pursuing Han tribe forces behind them. Other Snow Wolf tribe soldiers, seeing some of their comrades turn and charge back, though not understanding what was happening, followed suit in a muddle, adhering to the principle of "you can't go wrong following the crowd." Meanwhile, in the main force desperately fleeing ahead, the Snow Wolf chieftain, an arrow still lodged in his back, saw his own troops suddenly turn to block the Han tribe's pursuit. He faintly heard his warriors shouting, "Rescue the chieftain!" Enraged, he spat out a mouthful of old blood. His eyes rolled back, and he slumped weakly onto his horse, unconscious. Before closing his eyes, he kept muttering, "Modun deceives me. Modun deceives me." The pitiful 3,000 Snow Wolf tribe soldiers were thus duped by Modun's guard with just a few words, foolishly rushing back to intercept the Han tribe's pursuers. Although their numbers were less than half that of the Han pursuers, they indeed caused considerable trouble. After a fierce engagement, the Snow Wolf tribe lost over 1,000 men, and the remaining 2,000 were forced to surrender. As a result, the Han tribe's pursuers had to divert some manpower to guard these new prisoners of war. By the time they were free to continue the pursuit, Modun was nowhere to be seen on the grassland. He had long since vanished. Several thousand light cavalry had pursued for dozens of li, men and horses exhausted, and had lost their target. Zhenyang Yili could only helplessly order the army to rest where they were, treat the wounded, and gather the surrendered soldiers and horses. After waiting for about another half hour, Xuetu also arrived with a mighty army of nearly 20,000. He hadn't strayed off course, but unfortunately when he caught up, there wasn't even a horsehair of Modun to be seen. Xuetu, after learning about the situation, cursed furiously, "Hen hen di shuila yisham abian," violently whipped his horsewhip, and finally could only dejectedly lead his troops back to camp. Without logistical support, It was unrealistic for a large army to pursue Modun for hundreds of li. Thus, the Huban Guard, along with the Han tribe's 10,000 light cavalry, the rounded-up prisoners, and Suritu's 10,000 men, nearly 30,000 strong in total, began their march back. Along the way, they also conveniently cleared the battlefield, collecting weapons and bodies from the roadside. The surviving war horses were also rounded up. These were all important spoils of war and could not be wasted. It wasn't until afternoon that Zuetu led the large army back to the encampment. Meanwhile, on the main battlefield in Kayuan Commandery, the area had also been swept clean. After the weapons and war horses were collected, the remaining bodies of men and horses were handed over to the prisoners of war for removal. Without horses and weapons, it was impossible for the prisoners to escape. A couple of non-believers did try their luck, but on this vast open grassland, they couldn't get more than a few steps before being overtaken by Han tribe cavalry. They were either shot dead on the spot or dragged back alive with horse-lassoing poles, then severely whipped in front of the other prisoners, teaching them a bloody lesson. Escape? Don't even think about it. Kayuan Commandery reopened its city. Dates. The women, children, and common folk inside were all beaming with joy, cheering exuberantly. They had defeated a powerful enemy, defended their homes, and the sacrifices were within an acceptable range. After the battle, when tallying the casualties and spoils on both sides, the bigwigs of Kayuan Commandery were once again astounded by the abundant results of this battle. In this battle, the Han tribe had killed 13,621 enemy soldiers in action, rounded up 28,972 prisoners, captured 76,854 war horses, 837 two-wheeled carts, 18,561 cattle and sheep, and 18,349 bronze weapons, not including countless arrows. This didn't even count those trampled beyond recognition or blown to smithereens by artillery fire. After all, many fragments of flesh were impossible to count. The recorded death toll only included those whose bodies were relatively intact, even if only a head remained. In contrast, for the Han tribe itself, after a battle involving tens of thousands, casualties were less than 2,000. Among them, the Qianyu Guard had over 60 killed and about 300 wounded. The Huban Guard was even more impressive, with no casualties at all. The remaining casualties were among the nomadic herdsmen who had surrendered to the Han tribe, and deaths were few, mostly non-serious arrow wounds with a chance of recovery. About 3,000 war horses were lost, but compared to the astronomical number of captured horses, this loss was simply negligible. The assembled leaders, looking at the final statistics, were all beaming, their mouths agape with joy. Ha 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 ha. Our losses are so small, it's all thanks to the excellent armor our chieftain issued to us. Chai Duo was the first to laugh heartily, his face full of pride. The newly issued weapons aren't bad either. Those recurve composite bows, whether in power or range, can completely dominate the enemy's shoddy bows and arrows. This gave us a huge advantage. Chen Yangyili also chimed in happily, his face radiant with the joy of victory. In my opinion, the greatest credit for this battle still goes to those few cannons. King Rui, the prefect of Kayuan Commandery, had also rushed out from the city and was discussing the battle results with several military leaders. When clearing the battlefield, I saw it with my own eyes. At least 8,000 or 9,000 men died under cannon fire. If it weren't for those rounds of artillery inflicting huge losses on the enemy, striking first before the battle truly began, and breaking the enemy's spirit, it would have been really difficult for us to achieve such a glorious victory in this battle. Prefect Ying speaks the truth. The cannons indeed deserve the primary credit in this battle. No one can deny that. Juetu immediately picked up the thread upon hearing this. After all, he had commanded those initial earth-shattering artillery barrages. To put it bluntly, our chieftain is just brilliant. Sitting in the rear, strategizing, just a little bit of thinking, and he enables us to achieve victory from 1,000 li away. If you ask me, the greatest credit belongs to none other than the chieftain. Although Zuetu hadn't had the chance to personally charge into the fray and cut down enemies, he had commanded those initial artillery volleys. Now that the cannon's contribution was being discussed, he naturally had to blow his own horn a bit. Otherwise, it would seem like he hadn't done anything, which would be quite embarrassing. Ha 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 ha. Commander 2 is right. It's all thanks to our chieftain's capable leadership. Otherwise, we wouldn't have achieved such a glorious victory today, Ying Rui said with a laugh, then changed the subject, reminding everyone. However, I must remind you all now, shouldn't we report our victory to the chieftain? The chieftain is probably still worried about the situation here in the rear. There's another matter. How should the sacrificed soldiers be compensated? How should the meritorious soldiers be rewarded? How should these tens of thousands of surrendered soldiers be handled? And those tens of thousands of war horses, that's no small number. I think we should quickly consult the chieftain on how to deal with these spoils. Moreover, although the spoils from this battle are immense, we let the most important target, Modun, escape. How should we explain this to the chieftain? Should we rest and recuperate next, or continue to pursue Modun? All these require the chieftain's decision. I think we should jointly submit a petition to the chieftain for instructions, Ying Rui finally concluded. Right, a joint petition. I'll join too. Ha 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 ha. Alas, I hope the chieftain, seeing how much we've captured, won't punish us for letting Modun escape. Everyone chimed in, their faces showing a mixture of joy and a hint of worry. The victory report and the list of sacrificed soldiers were sent overnight to Hanyang City via Flying Eagle Express. The Flying Eagle arrived before dawn, but you had already given instructions that any mail delivered by Flying Eagle Express, no matter the time, must be brought to you immediately. After all, matters requiring Flying Eagle Express were usually urgent military intelligence. In the dead of night, a junior clerk carrying a flickering carbide lamp trotted all the way to your residence. The personal guards at the gate quickly informed a maidservant, who then hurriedly woke you from your dreams. Hearing it was the battle report from Kayuan Commandery, you rushed out in your underclothes, without even bothering to put on an outer robe. Quickly scanning the contents of the letter by lamplight, you were so overjoyed that you slammed the table and roared at the junior clerk outside the door. Immediately copy the victory report, post it in every county and village of the Han. Tribe, let everyone rejoice. Yes, the junior clerk, also beaming with joy, happily took the victory report aside to copy it. Men, pass on my order, reward the cannon foundry. All workers involved in casting cannons will receive an extra month's salary as a reward. Tell them to keep up the good work and build even more awesome weapons for me in the future. Yes. Rest. Assured, Chieftain. Another personal guard acknowledged the order and scurried off. You were still as excited as a child who had just received candy, pacing back and forth in the room, circling twice, like a fierce tiger trapped in a cage. It wasn't until John Ying silently came up behind you and draped an outer robe over you that you gradually calmed down, took the letter, and walked into the study, preparing to review it carefully. The immense victory filled you with elation, but you were not blinded by this temporary success. You knew very well that the most important enemy, Modun, had not yet been captured. Tens of thousands of prisoners of war, crying out for sustenance, awaited resettlement. Sacrificed soldiers awaited compensation, and mountains of spoils awaited distribution. These were all pressing matters. After careful consideration, you immediately took up your brush and swiftly wrote a reply. The Han tribe had newly established several counties this year, and there was a shortage of manpower for construction everywhere, and an even greater need to transfer population for border defense, since the war on the steppe had already begun. It couldn't be abandoned halfway with a strong start, but a weak finish. Otherwise, there would be even more trouble later. Thinking it over, you simply made a bold stroke and came up with a prisoner of war reformation plan. Directly use those 20,000 plus prisoners as slaves? No. That didn't align with the Han tribe's long-term interests. What you needed was a population that could work and reproduce, not a bunch of slaves who only consumed food. Therefore, you decided to directly reorganize these prisoners of war into a temporary army. Use these 20,000-plus cannon fodder to fight Modun to the death. This way, even if they died in battle, you wouldn't have to pay compensation. Perfect, win-win, highly profitable deal. For the Han tribe soldiers sacrificed in this battle, the tribe would uniformly issue funeral expenses and compensate the military dependents according to previously established standards. The Han tribe would pay to raise the martyrs' children to adulthood, and the children would have the right to inherit their father's noble rank. If the father had no noble rank before his death, then the orphan would be granted a 2-level noble rank, though this rank could not be passed down hereditarily. In addition, another batch of medicinal herbs and physicians would be dispatched to the front line at full speed to properly treat the wounded soldiers. As for those severely injured and disabled, all would be honorably discharged and sent home. The tribe would award them noble ranks based on their merits and arrange for them to do work within their capabilities. If they wished to return home to farm, that was perfectly fine too. The families of the sacrificed, surrendered nomadic warriors would also have their orphans granted noble ranks, and the Han tribe would cover funeral expenses. However, there would be no long-term pensions, but a one-time compensation of a few cattle and sheep could be given. Anyway, these cattle and sheep were captured spoils. If not given to them, no one would raise them. At the same time, the families of sacrificed nomadic herdsmen could also obtain a piece of pasture land officially designated by the Han tribe for the lifelong use of their orphans. However, after the children passed away, the Han tribe would also have the right to reclaim the use of the pasture land. As for those children unwilling to continue herding, they could also choose to relocate to the interior, and the Han tribe would provide compensation according to the treatment of other farming ethnic groups. And then there was Suritu. He wasn't considered part of the Han tribe yet, after all. Giving him some spoils of war would be generous enough. Regarding this fellow, you also gave specific instructions. The several hundred dilapidated carts captured could all be given to him, but not a single bronze weapon. However, the Han tribe could generously offer some iron pots and kitchen knives in exchange. As for livestock and horses, the Han tribe certainly wouldn't give them away for free, but they could be exchanged for precious salt. If Suritu dared to make any other unreasonable demands, they would all be rejected. No room for negotiation, as Mao. For those 28,172 prisoners of war, they must undergo ideological and moral re-education. They must be made to deeply understand that Modun, that grand deceiver, was entirely responsible for their tragic fate today. It was Modun who led them to their deaths. In short, all blame must be firmly pinned on Modun, and no refutation would be accepted. Those willing to accept reorganization could temporarily become Han tribe warriors. The Han tribe solemnly promised to dispatch troops with the finest weapons to lead them to seek justice from Modun and reclaim their own wives, children, cattle, sheep, and horses. Then, they could honorably join the Han tribe and become good herdsmen under Han tribe rule. Or if they themselves were willing to relocate to other Han tribe counties to farm, the Han tribe would welcome them with open arms. As for the remaining stubborn and uncooperative troublemakers, that was easy to handle. Send them to build walls, repair roads, carry bricks, dig canals, and mine coal. There was plenty of hard labor waiting for them. Let them undergo labor reformation for a few years and reflect properly first. This way, some of the hard-pressed workers who had been mining coal in Dongshin Commandery for over a year could also be replaced. Many of those commoners who had done heavy labor for over a year wanted to go to other counties to farm peacefully. It just so happened that the newly established counties also needed population to secure the borders, so the replaced population could be directly relocated there, killing two birds with one stone. Of the tens of thousands of captured war horses, apart from replacing those lost in this battle, the rest would be used to equip the reorganized, surrendered soldiers. Seeking justice from Modun would definitely require long-distance raids. For an army of 20,000, each man would need at least 2 horses, which meant 40,000 war horses. It seemed like a lot was captured, but after such distribution there wasn't much left. The remaining war horses were to have superior breeds selected from them to continue breeding in Kayuan Commandery. The others would be distributed to the various counties of the Han tribe to support the tribe's various construction projects. For example, the newly established Tuohai Commandery, with its vast land and sparse population, consisting entirely of boundless plains, required a large amount of animal power for both transportation and agriculture to drive development. This batch of captured war horses would primarily support those newly established counties. After the prisoners of war completed their reorganization, the Huban Guard, carrying 10 cannons, would lead the nomadic herdsmen who had defected to the Maikshu Han tribe and the reorganized surrendered soldiers to continue pursuing Modun. At the same time, a message was to be sent to Modun. As long as he was willing to personally surrender to the Han tribe could spare his miserable life. Otherwise, he could just wait to be continuously attacked by the Han tribe, attacked until he doubted his very existence. After the lengthy reply was written, you had it swiftly sent back via Flying Eagle Express. Then, you returned to your room, flipping through a worn-out calendar, carefully calculating the sailing date of the Fubo warship. If your calculations were correct, they should be nearing their destination by now, shouldn't they? You wondered how that kid Shu Da was doing, and whether he had completed his mission on time. Meanwhile, thousands of Lai from Hanyang City, on the vast, boundless sea, the enormous Fubo warship was riding the wind and cleaving the waves, swiftly cutting through the sparkling water. On the 4 towering mainmasts, all sails were fully billowed, sailing day and night towards the mysterious destination you had assigned. Another morning arrived. Nearly 1,000 crew members gradually awoke from their bunks in the ship's cabins and began a new round of tedious yet tense daily training. On the upper, middle, and lower gun decks, countless gunners were sweating profusely, practicing loading ammunition and repositioning cannons, their work chants rising and falling. Shu Da, with a large flatbread wrapped around bean sprouts stuffed in his mouth, was munching away as he leisurely patrolled the deck. Just then, the lookout at the top of the mainmast suddenly shouted at the top of his lungs, "Reporting to the commander, sir. I see the destination." Hearing the lookout's exciting report, Shu Da dashed to the ship's rail in a single bound, squinting hard into the distance. Sure enough, the faint outline of a continent appeared on the horizon. He immediately began to shout orders at the top of his voice. "Stop the ship! Stop the ship! Furl the sails, drop anchor! Stop the ship right here for me." The sailors on deck were all stunned, completely bewildered, unable to fathom what this commander was up to. The Fubo's captain also hurried over, asking with a puzzled expression, "Commander Shu, why stop the ship now? If we continue at full sail, we can definitely reach the destination before noon." "You don't know, Jack." Shu Da berated him head-on, spittle nearly flying onto the captain's face. "What's the hurry? To offer up our heads? We're here to fight, not to go to market. Now is not the best time. To avoid exposing our target prematurely, I order you to stop the ship immediately. We'll proceed again at dusk. Do you understand?" The captain, thoroughly chewed out, felt incredibly wronged, but rank trumps all. He could only sigh helplessly and obediently order the sailors to stop the ship. It couldn't be helped. The Han tribe had no professional naval forces before, so the Fubo's captain had been chosen from among the captains of the former 3-masted transport ships. When it came to sailing, he was definitely an expert. But when it came to military warfare, he was a complete novice, utterly clueless. As for Shu Da, he was, after all, a former prefect of a Han tribe commandery. He had participated in the campaign to suppress the cannibals, and had also commanded the Han tribe's early professional army. In terms of military warfare, he arguably knew a tiny bit more than the captain. However, when it came to ocean navigation, compared to the captain, he was also just as much of a layman. However, since you dared to appoint him as the commander of the Fubo Guard, it was naturally impossible that you hadn't considered this. Therefore, although the Fubo was the flagship of this fleet and still had its own independent captain, Shu Da, as the overall commander of the entire fleet, had the authority to command all the captains in the fleet, though this time in order. To rush for a surprise attack, the so-called fleet actually only consisted of the Fubo, this lone flagship, a bit shabby, but they couldn't lose their imposing air. Meanwhile, the leaders in Kaiyuan City had sent their victory report back to Hanyang City. The round trip took a full 4 days of anxious waiting. Only after 4 days did they finally receive your reply. Upon receiving it, they immediately and decisively began to reorganize the surrendered soldiers according to your orders, distribute the mountains of various supplies, and also dispatched scouts and mounted skirmishers like scattering beans to ascertain which corner Modun's allied forces were currently holed up in. Suritu was also politely invited into Kaiyuan City to discuss the distribution of spoils. He didn't dare utter a peep about the Han tribe's arrangements. After this battle, he had thoroughly seen the Han tribe's unfathomable hidden strength. It was simply not an existence that his current small stature could afford to provoke. In the face of such absolute military power, any talk of conspiracies or schemes was nonsense, purely self-humiliating. Suritu had also lost several hundred men in this battle, but he couldn't even dream of getting any prisoners of war, not even a single hair. Population, that precious strategic resource, could only belong to the Han tribe. However, the Han tribe was decent enough, promising to give him more precious white salt as compensation. After settling the spoils, Ying Rui, following your reply, extended a new cooperation invitation to Suritu, inviting him to join the Han tribe in continuing the pursuit of that defeated dog, Modun. If they seized good things, he would still get his share. In short, he definitely wouldn't be shortchanged. Suritu pondered with his head down for a while and finally, citing the tribe's need to continue herding for their livelihood, he only agreed to dispatch 3,000 men to assist in the battle. The rest of his forces would escort the spoils they had received this time and return directly to their tribe. Ying Rui and the others were not too surprised by this outcome. This operation to hunt down Modun was destined to be a protracted war. They had to be prepared for long-term warfare. After all, the grassland was so vast, just traveling back and forth would take a considerable amount of time, let alone chasing the enemy all over the world. Fortunately, the Han tribe was large and prosperous, with no shortage of warriors to begin with. For this operation, the Huban Guard dispatched 2,000 elites. The nomadic herdsmen who had defected to the Han tribe could muster 8,000 men, and with the reorganized surrendered soldiers, that was at least 20,000. Adding Suritu's 3,000 men, a combined army of 20 to 30,000 was enough to grind Modun's remaining routed forces into the dust. After discussing the subsequent plan of action, Kaiyuan Commandery began the tense and orderly work of screening prisoners of war and conducting ideological and moral re-education. There was no need to bother reorganizing the 1,000-odd Shin tribe prisoners. They were directly packed up and sent by ship to Dongshin Commandery to mine coal, contributing to the Han tribe's energy enterprise. Among the other surrendered soldiers, after a round of mutual accusations and public denunciations, a portion of Modun's die-hard high-ranking loyalists, the Snowwolf tribe's leadership, and the chieftains of other small and medium-sized tribes along with their trusted henchmen, were screened out. These individuals were all branded as slaves and would soon be sent by ship to various Han tribe construction sites for labor reformation, to deeply reflect on their mistakes through diligent sweat. After rigorous screening, only about 20,000 ordinary herdsmen from the middle and lower strata of various tribes remained. Most of these people had no direct conflicts of interest or deep-seated hatred with the Han tribe, and were considered ordinary masses who could be safely reformed. After a round of blame-shifting ideological education by Han tribe officials, appealing to both reason and emotion, these people finally had an epiphany. They profoundly realized who their true enemy was, who had deceitfully led them to their deaths with honeyed words, and how the Han tribe was sincerely working for the welfare of the steppe herdsmen and bringing them warmth. Furthermore, they now had nothing left. Because they had gone out to fight, their wives, children, cattle, sheep, and horses had all been left behind in their original encampments. Now that damned Modun had abandoned them, and also seized their wives, children, cattle, sheep, and horses. To get all these back, they had to join forces with the Han army and eliminate that bastard Modun. These surrendered herdsmen were quite enthusiastic about this. On one hand, they genuinely missed their wives, children, and hard-earned property. On the other hand, with such a powerful Han tribe army fighting alongside them, and with that mysterious weapon whose power was comparable to divine punishment, they were no longer afraid of Modun's remaining routed forces, and were full of confidence and anticipation for the operation to reclaim their wives, children, cattle, and sheep, whether they would establish their own households in the future, or join the Han tribe for a stable life. Having their wives, children, warm homes, and pens full of livestock was essential. This was an immediate practical difficulty. They had to strive for it, otherwise how could they go on living? Meanwhile, by a lakeside on the grasslands further south, after a full 4 days of arduous travel, Modun finally led his tattered army back to their spring and summer pasture lands. Counting their numbers again, the once mighty allied army of 60,000 was now reduced to less than 8,000. The losses were catastrophic, and their strength was severely depleted. The loss of cattle, sheep, and horses was astronomical, a painful thought. However, even after returning to his old lair, Modun dared not relax or slacken his guard in the slightest. He was no fool, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to incite such a large force. Therefore, he knew very well that the Han tribe would definitely beat a drowning dog this time. Taking advantage of his severely weakened state and low morale, they would surely lead a large army to encircle and annihilate him completely, and his pasture land was right here. Even if the Han tribe hadn't followed closely, they could certainly find out the location of his main camp from the surrendered prisoners. This place was no longer tenable. He had to quickly move his men and horses to other pastures to avoid the Han tribe's spearhead. Fortunately, many tribes had fallen at the hands of the Han tribe this time. He could now freely use the pasture lands left vacant by those tribes. With the 8,000 warriors he had left, plus the men stationed at his main camp, he could scrape together another 10,000-strong army. With these 10,000 men, as long as he could absorb all the wives, children, cattle, and sheep left behind by those small and medium-sized tribes, it wouldn't be long before he, Modun, would once again be a hegemon in the southern grasslands. However, what he didn't know was that on the lake not far away, that giant warship equipped with 120 dark cannons had, a long time ago, silently set its sights on him. The Grim Reaper's scythe was already hanging over his head. With his defeated army back in camp, Modun hastily gave orders to pack up and prepare to move. However, relocating so many people and livestock was clearly not something that could be done in a day or two. Everyone had been fleeing pell-mell for several days, men and horses exhausted. They had to catch their breath and rest their feet first. Modun wasn't too concerned about this. In his view, just dealing with the mountains of prisoners and spoils would keep those Han tribe fellows busy for a while. No matter how fast they were, they couldn't possibly catch up within 2 days. As for after 2 days, he would have long since slipped away with his men and horses far, far away. In the main camp by the lake, some of the returning men were fast asleep in their tents, while others listlessly went out to graze their herds. Women and children were busy packing various household items, preparing in advance for the upcoming major relocation. The most tragic were the families whose men had died in battle. The women all covered their faces and wept, mourning their deceased husbands with heart-wrenching cries. However, after crying and exhausting themselves, they still had to suppress their grief and continue packing or herding. After all, life had to go on. The living had to find a way to survive. By evening, the herders who had gone out returned one after another, driving their cattle and sheep back to the camp, corralling all the livestock into pens. Only then did they drag their weary bodies back to their respective tents to prepare simple meals. They were to set off tomorrow. This would be their last night here. However, just at this moment, the five-masted gunship, which had been drifting like a ghost on the lake, also began to raise its sails again, silently heading towards the shore. Commander. Shu, your subordinate doesn't understand. Why don't we go during the day, but insist on waiting until night to act? Looking at the newly raised sails, the Fubo's captain, still looking perplexed, couldn't help but ask, "Are you an idiot? Let me ask you, what is our target this time?" Shuda retorted irritably. He was now seriously doubting whether the captain the chieftain had picked for him had been kicked in the head by a donkey. It's those herdsmen in Modun's main camp? The captain, despite being thoroughly berated by Shuda, wasn't particularly angry. He had indeed been transferred from the transport fleet and didn't know much about warfare. But now that the chieftain had made him the captain of this super warship, it was better to learn as much as possible sooner rather than later. Otherwise, who knew when the chieftain might get angry and replace him? This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, as long as he could seize it with the impressive resume of captain of the Han tribe's first naval flagship. Wouldn't future success be just around the corner? So as long as he could learn real skills, even being scolded a bit was worth it in his opinion. Then let me ask you again, will the herdsmen stay obediently at home during the day? Shuda suppressed the urge to roll his eyes and asked again. Oh, I understand. The captain slapped his thigh, a look of sudden realization on his face. Commander Shu, you mean that the herdsmen all go out to graze their herds during the day? No one is at home. If we go then, we'll only expose our target prematurely and make a wasted trip, so we have to wait until night when the cattle and sheep are back in their pens and the common folk are all home asleep. Then we can quietly sneak over and catch them all in one go. The commander is truly brilliant. Your subordinate is impressed. Impressed. All right, cut the flattery. Shuda waved his hand impatiently and ordered again. Go arrange for men to survey the water depth near the shore immediately. This time, we need to get as close to the shore as possible. But we absolutely cannot let the ship run aground. This way, we can fully utilize the tremendous advantage of our cannon's range and maximize our battle results. Do a good job and you'll get your share of the credit. Yes, rest assured, Commander. I guarantee the mission will be completed. The captain immediately puffed out his chest and responded loudly. The Fubo sailed rapidly across the vast lake from dusk until the sun had set completely. By the time it was fully dark, it was around 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening. The large ship began to slow down and stop when it was still several kilometers from the shore. Then, several light small boats were lowered from the ship, and the sailors rowed vigorously, carefully approaching the shore. The small boats used the dense reeds in the shallow waters as cover and silently approached the lakeshore. Then sailors took out lead weights and carefully measured the water depth, one sounding at a time. After they had determined an area safe enough for the large ship to maneuver, they planted rows of bamboo poles along the edge of the shallow water, tied ropes to them, and finally hung a few dimly lit carbide lamps on the ropes as reference points to prevent the large ship from accidentally running aground by getting too close to the shore. The deep water line marker was over 300 meters from the shore, and it was impossible for the herdsmen's tents to be pitched right next to the lakeshore. Therefore, the herdsmen on shore couldn't possibly detect those faint lights with the naked eye. However, this couldn't deceive the loyal sheepdogs constantly guarding the sheep pens. Not long after the carbide lamps were hung, several vigilant sheepdogs ran to the shore, sniffing around with their heads down, and let out a few low barks towards the dark lake surface. However, their barking did not attract the herdsmen's attention. The small boats that had just finished surveying the water depth also quickly turned around and rowed towards the direction where the large ship was anchored. However, they did not immediately board the ship. Instead, they held lanterns below the large ship and carefully guided it slowly towards the shore. The partially unfurled sails propelled the enormous hull slowly forward. Found a suitable angle, then turned smoothly, finally adjusting its hull to be parallel to the shore, slowly approaching the simple navigation buoys floating on the water. In the pitch-black night, a behemoth resembling a prehistoric monster suddenly appeared near Modun's main camp. The sheepdogs, already somewhat uneasy due to the unfamiliar scent, instantly went into an uproar, barking furiously at the lake, their barks shrill and rapid. The herdsmen in the camp were finally startled by this sudden outburst of barking. They grabbed their bows, arrows, and spears and warily emerged from their tents. Having fled continuously for several days, they were now like birds startled by the mere twang of a bowstring, truly afraid that the Han tribe would launch another surprise attack while they were still unsettled. However, when they saw the direction from which the sheepdogs were sounding the alarm, they all frowned. The lake surface? What could there be on the lake surface? Those herdsmen who had previously personally experienced the Han tribe's amphibious assault were instantly scared out. Of their wits, their faces ashen. Some immediately raised torches and shouted warnings throughout the camp, while others even fumbled to blow the ox-horn trumpets used for wartime alarms. In an instant, the entire camp erupted with alarm calls, shouts, and cries, descending into utter chaos. Not good, the Han army is coming from the lake. Wee wee wee. The shrill sound of the ox-horn trumpet pierced the night sky. Modun was abruptly awakened from his sleep. He leaped from his bed, snatched a sharp steel saber he had captured, which was lying beside him, flicked open the tent flap with it, and questioned loudly outside. What happened? Did the Han tribe attack? Chieftain, Chieftain, run! The Han tribe is attacking from the water. A personal guard stumbled in, his voice distorted with fear. What did you say? Did you see their ships? Modun grabbed the guard's collar and demanded fiercely. No. Didn't see. The guard stammered in terror. Then what? Are you yelling about? Modun, furious, kicked the man, sending him staggering. It's what they're all saying. The man, kicked to the ground, felt a surge of grievance and couldn't help but mutter a defense. Modun ignored him, hastily put on his clothes, grabbed his weapons, and ordered someone to quickly bring him his horse. Then he commanded his trusted followers to rush to the shore to check the situation. Meanwhile, the Fubo warship, silently floating on the lake, was also completely dark, with no lights lit, precisely to avoid being discovered prematurely by the herdsmen on shore. Unfortunately, they had underestimated those loyal and vigilant sheepdogs. Still a considerable distance from the shore, Shu Da had already spotted through his spyglass that the shore was in utter chaos. He knew the target was definitely exposed. Since that was the case, there was no point in hiding anymore. He immediately ordered the ship to be lit up, the bow turned south, parallel to the shore, and to begin moving slowly. At the same time, all the gun ports on the starboard side were opened, and all 60 dark cannons were run out, ready to fire. The ammunition was preloaded, precisely to unleash the most ferocious firepower the moment they reached the target area, striving to inflict maximum casualties and chaos on the enemy before they could react. The next moment, following Shu Da's command from the command platform at the stern, the cannons on the 3 gun decks below erupted in deafening roars, one after another, like a string of firecrackers being lit. Modun's trusted lackey had just reached the lakeside, panting, when the lake surface several hundred meters away, whoosh, lit up with a blaze of lights. Whoa, so high, like a skyscraper in Kaiyuan City. The thought had just popped into his head when he himself shivered in fear. Where did a tall building come from in the middle of the lake? Even the Han tribe's big ships weren't this outrageous. Were they? Before the thought could fully form, that tall building, bang bang bang, erupted with clusters of firelight, followed by a rumbling thunder that smashed across the lake. This commotion was familiar. Wasn't it the same thing that had bombarded their 60,000-strong Allied army into smithereens just a few days ago? The Grim Reaper's roar. His brain hadn't even processed it when the whistling cannonballs thwack blasted him into a bloody mist. Not even dregs left. Boom, rumble, rumble. The tremendous roar of cannons was incessant. 60 cannons roared simultaneously, as if they cost nothing. The density of firepower, tisk tisk, was simply unchivalrous. What was even more extreme was that for this ship-to-shore bombardment, you had long ago given Shuda a strict order: double charges. Blast out an ultra-long standby range for me. Even across the lake, Modun's lair had to be bombarded to its very foundations, as deep as possible. The effect? Excellent. Iron lumps with double charges whined as they flew 3,000 meters. The unlucky herdsmen and livestock piles near the shore bore the brunt. Cannonballs pierced through the herds like skewering candied haws, then plunged into the distant tent clusters, rolling for over 2,000 meters before stopping. This range was enough to plow through Modun's entire camp. Countless tents were blown away. Felt encountering bonfires instantly became huge fireballs. Many herdsmen, still playing chess with the Duke of Zhou in their dreams, were roasted to a crisp on the outside and tender on the inside. The livestock herds near the shore suffered even more grievously. At night, the animals, having frolicked all day, were obediently packed into their pens, the density incredibly tight. When the cannonballs flew in, one hit would decimate a large area, sending flesh and blood flying. Those animals lucky enough to survive, faced with this apocalyptic scene and the thunderous roars from afar, all went mad, uncontrollably leaping and bucking, desperately trying to break out of their enclosures, further throwing the already chaotic camp into utter disarray. And Modun? He was long since scared out of his wits, his sphincter tightening. These Han tribe bastards actually mounted that deadly thing on a ship for a sneak attack. With just that one roar, more than half of his assets were gone. How many Han tribe soldiers had come? When would they land? Modun's mind was a blank, with only one word: flee. Was this thing something humans could withstand? If he didn't run now, was he waiting to be blasted into meat paste for kanji? The next second, Modun scrambled onto his horse without even time to say goodbye, and fled with a few die-hard personal guards. Army, assemble my ass. Anyway, this wasn't his only lair. This was just the largest one. Once he reached another territory, using the benefits extorted from the Shin tribe, he could pull together another group of followers in minutes. His escape, however, miserably doomed the herdsmen in the camp. Most of them were seeing cannons, this rare thing, for the first time. They couldn't even see where the enemy was firing from, only watching their cattle, sheep and horses turn into a pile of rotten flesh. The herdsmen couldn't even cry. Unlike farmers who rely on land for food, their entire families depended on these livestock for survival. Now the dead were dead, the escaped had escaped. How could they go on living? The encampment by the shore was in complete chaos. Many warriors who had fled earlier weren't killed by Han tribe cannonballs, but were instead trampled to death by their own panicked livestock. A truly unjust fate. Faced with this invisible attack, what else could they do but flee? Just as the herdsmen, gritting their teeth and stamping their feet, were preparing to abandon their belongings and run for their lives naked, the second round of cannon fire roared from the lake. The Fubo moved slowly forward, and the angle of the incoming cannonballs changed accordingly. The herdsmen had nowhere to hide. Many of the stampeding livestock were hit again, suffering even heavier casualties. Some timid herdsmen, terrified, prostrated themselves on the ground, covering their heads and begging heaven for mercy. Bizarrely, they actually managed to dodge the whistling cannonballs, but just as they were about to pat their chests and say close call, the next second, a tide of stampeding livestock trampled over them, turning them into mincemeat in the blink of an eye. The cannons continued to roar. After 5 full volleys, Shuda, still not fully satisfied, waved his hand. Stop. Looking towards the shore again, whoa, it was covered in burning tents and shredded flesh, like a living hell. The livestock that could run had mostly fled. The people who hadn't died had also mostly slipped away. Occasionally, a few survivors could be seen, staring blankly at the carnage, wailing to the heavens like ghosts. Commander, what now? Do we land? The Fubo's captain asked Shuda, excitedly rubbing his hands. Land my ass. Shuda waved his hand. The chieftain said float on the water caused trouble. However, his eyes darted and he grinned. So many cattle and sheep on shore, it's too wasteful to leave them. Brothers, organize 200 men, go down and drag some cattle and sheep back to improve our meals. We're in for a long haul with them, our mouths can't suffer. Remember, make one haul and leave, don't go far. Just stay within cannon range. Don't be greedy, just enough for us to eat for a while. Got it, I'll get right on it. The captain scurried off happily. The ship immediately stopped and dropped anchor. The sailors lowered small boats and efficiently organized 200 men to go ashore and pick up scraps. The herdsmen, still alive on shore, seeing the sailors land, looked as if they had seen ghosts, their faces deathly pale. They were probably scared stiff, not daring to move. This flurry of activity continued late into the night. Only when the ship's cold storage was once again stuffed full of beef and mutton did the Fubo, satisfied, weigh anchor and slip away, heading for the next unlucky target. As for the mess on shore, who had time to deal with it? Commander, next stop, where to? With the first battle won, Shuda, gnawing on a fragrant roasted leg of lamb, his mouth glistening with grease, wiped his mouth with heroic flair. Next, it must be that bastard. Modun's next stronghold. The chieftain's mission is to patrol the lakes in the southern grasslands. Wherever we see Modun's den, we wipe it out. Beat him until he's bankrupt. Beat him until he shivers at the sight of a lakeshore. Until he wets his pants at the sound of a ship. Until he cries for help at the sound of cannons. We absolutely have to beat him until he's crying for his mommy and daddy. Until he voluntarily comes to the Han tribe to acknowledge us as his father and call us boss.